Hi, my name is Amanda Bach, and I will be reading one of my favorite books, The Jazz Fly, written by Matthew Golub. The Jazz Fly, starring the Jazz Bugs. The Jazz Fly, Willie the Worm, Nancy the Gnat, and Sammy the Centipede. Now this part has an echo, so every time I say za-ba-za-boo, za-ba-zee, za-ba-roni, you echo me. Let's practice. Za-ba-za-bee, za-ba-zoo, za-ba-roni. All right, you're ready. The Jazz Fly. Zzz, a fly buzzed by. It was late in the day, and he was lost. So he flew to a frog that was sitting on a log and asked the frog which way to town. Za-ba-ba-zee, za-ba-zoo, za-ba-roni. The frog didn't get the way the Jazz Fly talked. Ribbit, the frog answered. Ribbit, ribbit. The fly flew zzz to a hog in a bog. He stayed clear of the mud to keep his black tux clean and asked the hog, which way to town? Za-ba-za-boo, za-ba-zee, za-ba-roni. Oink, the hog answered. Oink, oink. The fly saw a donkey short and gray, so he flew zzz to ask him the way. Za-ba-ba-zoo, za-ba-zee, za-ba-roni. The donkey just began to bray. Hee-haw, hee-haw. At last the fly flew to a furry dog. One more time he asked. Za-ba-za-boo, za-ba-zee, za-ba-roni. Ruff, ruff, ruff. Barked the pooch right away. She pointed her nose to say, go that way. The Jazz Fly flew past weeds and clover till he reached a street that was paved all over. He leaned left down the alley, right through the door. He saw fancy waiters creeping all across the floor. Beetles and maggots had come to hear the show. They were dining with the locusts by the fireflies' glow. The band was looking antsy. It was 8:30. They grumbled, man, that fly is always late. The fly tugged at his sleeves, strolled to his drums, twirled around his brushes, and counted off a song. Za, zee, za, zee, zoo, zay. Willie the Worm inched up and down his bass. Ba-boom, boom, 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 ba-boom, ba-boom, boom, ba-boom. Nancy the Gnat sashayed with her sax. Sammy the Centipede hit the piano keys like a man with 100 hands. The fly swished with his brushes, swish, swish. Thumped with his bass drum, thumpity thump. Made his cymbals ring, zing, zing, ping, ping. Then, like a chef stirring dinner in a pot, he put it all together and dished it out hot. Za-ting, za-ba-doom, baby, switch, zap-a-boom, zap-a-zee-za, ooh. The fly was jamming, not scamming, but swimming like a salmon. But then, the Queen Bee's Club sat down with a huff. This band plays good, but that's not good enough. I want a sound that'll make bugs shout. I want a new beat, or this band is out. The fly, who'd been very confident up until now, suddenly felt kind of small. He knew he'd have to come up with something different if the Jazz Bugs were to keep their jobs at the jazz club. So he thought, and he thought, until the fly recalled the sounds he had heard that day. He mixed them all up in a brand new way. He crossed a bridge, stepped beyond the line, took a chance, and began to shine. Swish, zoom, zappity, boop, rabbit, rabbit. Zappy doom bang! Oink, oink. Swish zappa zappa hee haw hee. Zubba, a rubba, a roof, roof, roof. A zubba da dubba da dubba da dubba da hee haw rony. Oink zabba hee haw ribbit roof. Ding! Well, the beetles and the maggots stopped eating their chow. Willie and Nancy and Sammy said, "Wow!" The cockroach waiter shouted, "Go, man, go! Dig that fly, he could really blow." The joint was hopping, bopping, wriggling on the floor. They never heard a sound like this before. The word got out about the jazz bug sound, about the white hot drummer who broke new ground. Beetles packed the club, locusts came by swarm. The jazz bugs' names went up in lights. And to make sure he never again lost his way, the fly picked up his friends in a limo each day. Oink, hee-haw, rim-a-noo, boogie-boom, zabba, oink, dabba-rip, hee-haw, rony. The end.
Hi, my name's Sam I am, and I'm thrilled to be reading to you today from the couch. The couch is my favorite place to read. I've got a question for you. What's your favorite place to read? When you have homework to do or a story that you want to enjoy, where do you sit down and read it? Well, like I said, I'm on my couch. Hopefully you're comfortable too. And I want to read to you today from a story called Days with Frog and Toad. You probably can't see that real well, and I'm sorry about that. But Days with Frog and Toad is by author Arnold Lobel. And let me tell you this. I wanted to read this story to you today because it's one of my favorite stories from when I was a kid. And 7 years ago, Cornstalk did an amazing job of bringing Frog and Toad to life on the stage. I've seen quite a few Cornstalk shows, and their Frog and Toad show 7 years ago was one of my very favorites. So thank you, Cornstalk, and thank you to you for tuning in to me reading today. All right, let's get to the story, okay? Let me turn to it here. This is a story called Tomorrow. It's part of the book that I already mentioned, and I'm just going to read you a chapter from it. It starts out like this. Toad woke up. "Drat," he said. "This house is a mess. I have so much work to do." Frog looked through the window. "Toad, you are right," said Frog. "It is a mess." Toad pulled the covers over his head. "I will do it tomorrow," said Toad. "Today, I will take life easy." Frog came into the house. "Toad," said Frog, "your pants and jacket are lying on the floor." "Tomorrow," said Toad from under the covers. "Your kitchen sink is filled with dirty dishes," said Frog. "Tomorrow," said Toad. "There is dust on your chairs." "Tomorrow," said Toad. "Your windows need scrubbing," said Frog. "Your plants need watering." "Tomorrow," cried Toad. "I will do it all tomorrow." Toad sat on the edge of his bed. "Blah," said Toad. "I feel down in the dumps." "Why?" asked Frog. "I am thinking about tomorrow," said Toad. "I am thinking about all the many things that I will have to do." "Yes," said Frog, "tomorrow will be a very hard day for you." "But, Frog," said Toad, "if I pick up my pants and jacket right now, then I will not have to pick them up tomorrow, will I?" "No," said Frog, "you will not have to." Toad picked up his clothes. He put them in the closet. "Frog," said Toad, "if I wash my dishes right now, then I will not have to wash them tomorrow, will I?" "No," said Frog, "you will not have to." Toad washed and dried his dishes. He put them in the cupboard. "Frog," said Toad, "if I dust my chairs and scrub my windows and water my plants right now, then I will not have to do it tomorrow, will I?" "No," said Frog, "you will not have to do any of it tomorrow." Toad dusted his chairs. He scrubbed his windows. He watered his plants. "There," said Toad. "Now I feel better. I'm not down in the dumps anymore." "Why?" asked Frog. "Because I have done all that work," said Toad. "Now I can save tomorrow for something that I really want to do." "What is that?" asked Frog. "Tomorrow," said Toad, "I can just take life easy." Toad went back to bed. He pulled the covers over his head and he fell asleep. The end.
Hello everyone, my name is Miss Shannon, and today I will be reading Fanny. This is a serendipity book written by Stephen Cosgrove and illustrated by Robin James. Beside a long, dusty road, far out in the country, was a lonely old wooden fence. The fence stood alone for miles and miles, with only sweet-smelling lilac and an occasional honeysuckle rose for companions. At the very end of the rickety-pickety fence was an old run-down farm nestled at the top of a wooded hill. The farm was filled with all sorts of animals: tough old chickens who laid very few eggs, some tough old cows who gave very little milk, and a small herd of tough old sheep who gave very little wool at all. Amidst the furry animals at this old barnyard lived a fluffy gray cat named Fanny. In many ways, Fanny was an ordinary cat. She had an ordinary long swishy tail like all other cats. She had ordinary green eyes that looked at all the world in wonder like all other cats. Ordinary, yes, but different too, for Fanny had only 3 legs. Because Fanny had only 3 legs instead of 4, she had to hobble and hop to and fro to get there and back again. She hopped to get a drink of milk, and on warm spring days, hopped atop the fence to sun herself. Even though she had only 3 legs, Fanny got around pretty well. In fact, she needed no help from any of the other animals in the barnyard. Not that they would ever offer anyway. The other animals never talked to Fanny because they felt it was too embarrassing to talk to a creature who was handicapped. Whenever Fanny hobbled by, the chickens would turn their backs, ruffle their feathers, and look the other way. Sometimes a chick would try to talk to her, but one of the old hens would always come kickling and cackling and shoo the chick away. "Don't talk to her, little chicken. You would just embarrass her. Besides, she has nothing to say." But Fanny would act as if she didn't mind and hobble on her way. Whenever she hopped by the dairy barn, All of the cows would gawk and stare with big, brown, blinking eyes as she passed. If one of the calves tried to stick its neck through the fence to talk to her, one of the old bossy milk cows would moo it away and say, "Don't stare, you silly calf. You'll just embarrass her. Besides, she has nothing to say." Fanny would just pretend she didn't hear as she batted at a bumblebee or butterfly that happened to be flying by. Whenever Fanny took the well-worn path in the pasture between the barn and the old farmhouse, the little spring lambs would gather to talk to her as she limped by. No sooner would they start rushing through the clover than an old ewe would call them back to the flock. "Come back, little lambs, and don't be bad. You'll just embarrass her. Besides, she has nothing to say." Poor old Fanny would just continue on her way. So, none of the creatures would talk to Fanny as she quietly went on her way. None, that is, except for a scruffy little puppy named Ruby. Little Ruby had no parents that anyone could remember and slept in an old building filled with hay. Ruby loved to kiss and lick the other animals of the farm. With each of the creatures it was the same. Kisses and licks, kisses and licks. It was often said that Ruby was the fastest licker around. With tail wagging, she would sidle up to a chicken with sleep still in its eyes, and before that chicken could let out a cackle, her tongue was out, the lick was licked, and it would squawk, "Oh, yuck, oh me, oh my." Well, all the animals had been licked and loved by Ruby so much that one day an old ewe and bossy cow cruelly dared the little puppy to kiss old Fanny as she hobbled on her way. Ruby took the dare, and hiding in the tall clover that grew by the fence, she waited for the cat to come by. Sure enough, in no time at all, old Fanny came hobbling along. With a leap and a giggle, Ruby dashed from the clover and gave Fanny a long and loving lick from the tip of her nose to the top of her head. That little dog surely was the fastest licker around. Old Fanny didn't try and run away like the other animals. Instead, she just licked and loved that scruffy puppy right back. Lick for lick. Contrary to what the barnyard animals had thought, Fanny wasn't embarrassed in the slightest, and she had a lot to say. Ruby and Fanny sat on the path for the longest times, just licking and loving and laughing about this and that. Later in the old wooden barn, they curled up together in a warm pile of hay. As the sun peeked through the cracks and slats, they fell asleep, curled up in each other's love. From that day forward, the two of them were thought of as one, for they shared all the farm had to share. Together they hobbled and hopped from here to there and back again. They stopped at the chicken pens and talked to the chicks about the weather and chatted about the sunflowers that grew so very tall. The chicks were shocked to find that Fanny wasn't embarrassed by her handicap at all. She had a lot to say. They chatted with the calves at the dairy barn. The calves were so moved by what Fanny had to say that they shared some milk they had gotten from the old bossy cow, who just looked the other way. The cat mewed and meowed and so loudly that all could hear about her life on the farm, a tale she had never been able to share before. Fanny and Ruby walked through the meadow of deep purple clover, talking to the lambs as they frolicked and played. and they too learned that she had a heart full of things she wanted to say. From that day forward, the lambs, the calves, the chicks, and a scruffy little puppy named Ruby, and a handicapped, three-legged cat named Fanny were the best of friends. For Fanny had never been handicapped by what she was, only by what the other creatures thought she was. As you walk, hop, hobble, or wheel, meeting people of different kinds, remember that being handicapped is only a state of mind. The end.